I can still feel the cold, the way it seeped through my layers, settling deep beneath my skin, where it mingled with the fog rolling off the ice. The aurora flickered above me, pale and uneven, casting shapes that seemed almost deliberate, almost alive. My boots crunched on frost-hardened snow, each step echoing in the silence of a world untouched by anything human. Somewhere far above, a static hum lingered in the air, like a distant radio left on, its signal weak but insistent. I remember the way the shadows twisted between the ice ridges, long and unnatural, as if they were waiting for me to notice. And then, just as I paused to catch my breath, I saw it, briefly, an outline, not quite human, gliding across the horizon, too fast to be walking, yet eerily deliberate. I convinced myself it was just my mind playing tricks, the isolation fraying the edges of reason. But then the light shifted again, revealing a form pressed against the ice, staring back, silent, observing. I told myself to step forward to investigate, but the silence was too heavy, too aware. That's when I heard the whisper, or maybe it was the wind, soft, deliberate, almost a question. I froze. The world felt impossibly still, and in that stillness I realized I was no longer alone. And then, that's when I saw it, hovering just beyond the ridge, watching me in a way I couldn't explain. The snow lay thick around me. Each step sank softly, but the ground seemed hollow. A fog wrapped the trees in pale light, and I could barely see beyond the nearest trunks. Footprints appeared in front of me, small, deliberate, fading as if the snow itself had swallowed them. I paused, pressing my glove against the cold bark of a tree. The frost burned under my skin, sharp and immediate. The trail continued. Then it vanished. I looked back, but the snow was empty. The forest felt wrong, too quiet. I walked again. The air was thick, heavy, smelling of wet pine and frozen earth. A rustling came from somewhere far off. Or maybe it came from nowhere at all. Shadows moved. Not with the wind. Against it. I squinted through the gray, trying to find their source. Branches swayed silently, and the fog swallowed them whole. A low hum began, faint at first, vibrating beneath the soles of my boots. It grew, not loud exactly, but it wrapped around me, cold and soft and unrelenting. I stopped, breath frozen in my chest. The footprints reappeared, closer now. They led deeper into the fog. Then, just as suddenly, they were gone again. I wanted to follow. And yet, I didn't. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Every movement felt exaggerated. Every snap of a twig echoed like a gunshot. The hum shifted. A metallic taste came to my tongue, bitter, like ice touching steel. My fingers tingled. My ears felt full. The fog pressed against me, thick and damp, smelling faintly of smoke. I thought I saw something. A figure? A flicker at the edge of sight. But when I blinked, it was gone. I could swear it had moved closer. Or maybe I had moved closer. The snow beneath me was unbroken, silent, no footprints, nothing. Yet the hum continued, constant, patient. A shadow stretched across the trail, long, thin, impossible. It bent with the fog, curling around the trees like smoke. I couldn't tell where it began or ended. I wanted warmth. I wanted the soft glow of a cabin, the smell of fire and wood. But the forest had none of that. Only this gray light, endless and swallowing. I took another step. The snow was icy, brittle. It cracked under my weight, sharp and hollow. A wind blew? Or was it the trees shifting? It carried a faint, whispering tone, like voices speaking beneath water. The footprints returned, closer now, almost beneath me. I didn't look down. My eyes were drawn forward, to the fog that seemed to pulse with the hum. The cold pressed my lungs. I shivered. And then it was gone. The footprints, the hum, the motion. Everything paused. I was alone. The fog had thickened. It muffled even my own heartbeat. Every breath was loud. Every footstep fragile. Something moved behind me. Slowly. Softly. I didn't turn. I couldn't. I just walked. The path uncertain. The forest endless. And the hum lingered, vibrating in the ice beneath me. Waiting. I don't know if the footprints will return, or if the shadows will finally step forward. I only know that the snow is endless and the fog is patient, and I am still following. The snow had thinned slightly, leaving the ground hard and brittle underfoot. The fog clung to the trees, pale and heavy, as if it were breathing. I could see shapes ahead, uncertain, wavering in the gray. Then I noticed the lights, pale, green, flickering at the horizon. Soft, distant, almost like fireflies trapped in ice. I blinked and they moved. Or maybe I moved, I stepped closer. They retreated, I paused. They flickered again, teasing just beyond reach. The cold wrapped my legs. The air smelled faintly of moss and wet snow. I felt the hum beneath me once more. It wasn't strong, just a vibration against the soles of my boots. The lights seemed to pulse with it, small and hesitant, like they were alive. I reached out, hand trembling. Nothing. A rustling came from behind me. Slow, deliberate, soft footsteps through snow that didn't hold shape. I turned my head slightly. The fog swallowed the movement. Still, I felt it. Someone or something following. The lights moved again. Closer this time, or so I thought. The green glow reflected faintly on the frost, giving the trees an eerie silver edge. I took another step. Then they flickered away, receding as if the fog itself were pushing them forward. The hum grew fainter. I stopped, listening. The forest breathed around me, sharp, cold, wet. A twig snapped beneath my weight. Somewhere far off, a branch scraped against another. The rustling behind me continued, patient, waiting. I whispered to myself, though no sound escaped the fog. The green lights shivered on the horizon. They were teasing me, or warning me. I walked, each step careful, deliberate. The snow crunched beneath my boots. I smelled frost and something else, metal, distant and sharp. The rustling grew a heartbeat faster. Or maybe my own pulse had quickened. The lights flickered again. Closer, or just closer in my mind. They danced along the fog, pale and insistent. I could feel a soft wind rolling off them, chilling my face, curling into my hair. My eyes strained to catch their movement. Every tree cast long, uncertain shadows. I stopped. The fog thickened around my chest, heavy and damp. Breath formed clouds that lingered too long, curling like smoke. The rustling paused, then continued. Soft footsteps, fading, returning. The lights flickered again. I reached for them. They vanished completely. The horizon was gray, nothing but fog. Silence settled like snow, dense, oppressive, unyielding. The rustling was gone. The hum was gone. Even my own breath felt loud in the emptiness. I moved forward slowly, hands brushing against frozen branches. The cold burned my skin. The fog pressed closer, soft, damp, unbroken. Every step felt heavier. Every shadow seemed to lean toward me. I wanted warmth, even a faint glow of a distant cabin. But the fog held only emptiness. The green lights would not return. Not tonight. I walked a little farther. The snow whispered beneath me. The forest exhaled around me. I was alone, and I knew. The lights weren't gone. They had only retreated, waiting, watching. The wind carried a bitter bite. Snow drifted in uneven waves across the frozen plains. The fog lingered low, clinging to my boots, brushing against my coat. I saw it then. A building, rigid and gray, half buried in frost. A research station, abandoned, frozen in place like a skeleton caught mid-step. I approached slowly. The snow whispered beneath me. The door hung ajar. Metal groaned quietly when I nudged it. Inside, the air was still, stale with ice and faint chemicals. The hum started almost immediately. Low, constant, electrical, without any visible source. Equipment blinked, monitors faintly alive in pale, cold light. I pressed my fingers against the frost-coated console. The metal shivered under my touch. Everything was off, yet alive. The smell of ozone and rust lingered, subtle but sharp. I moved further inside. Every step echoed softly against the frozen floor. Walls stretched into shadow. And then I noticed the markings, lines etched into metal and paint. Letters, numbers, shapes, moving when I looked away. I blinked, turned my head. They had shifted, not much, just enough to feel wrong. A chair was overturned. Its shadow stretched into a corner like it had been pushed slowly, deliberately. The hum seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat. I swallowed. The air pressed heavy against my chest. I touched another mark. The paint was cold, slightly damp. It smelled faintly of ink and old snow. I blinked again. It had moved, closer, sharper. Or perhaps I had stepped closer without noticing. The fog pressed against the windows. I could see my breath curl in small, quick bursts. Outside, the wind whispered through twisted metal frames. Inside, silence seemed to thicken. Even the hum felt watchful now, like a pulse just for me. I walked down the narrow hall. Soft footsteps seemed to echo behind me. Or perhaps they were my own. The markings on the walls caught every corner of my eye, writhing when I didn't look directly. Lines became words. Words became shapes. Shapes became impossible. I paused. The room smelled faintly of burnt circuits and frozen air. My hands tingled. The hum had changed. Slower. Lower. Waiting. A door opened ahead, frozen mid-swing. I stepped closer, brushing against the frost on the frame. The cold bit through my gloves. Inside, shadows pooled in corners. The equipment glowed faintly, a pale green light that made the walls shift subtly. I realized I wasn't alone. The feeling pressed against me. Not loud, not physical, but heavier than air. Patient. Observing. I looked back. Nothing. Only the long hallway, lined with frozen windows, empty chairs, and the faint hum. But I knew it was there. The air thickened with its presence. The fog outside seemed to push against the glass, soft and damp, almost alive. I stepped away, hands brushing metal, frost crunching under boots. Every breath echoed. Every shadow seemed to lean toward me. The markings shifted once more, a whisper of movement that was almost a sigh. I didn't dare blink. I didn't dare breathe too deeply. The hum persisted. Soft, constant, insistent, the building held its frozen breath. And I understood suddenly the truth of the place. It was watching, always watching. I took another step. The cold pressed against me. The fog outside rolled lazily across the windows. The lights pulsed faintly, the markings shifting silently. I didn't move again for a long moment. I was alone. And not alone. The sky was low and gray, heavy with clouds. Snow drifted in slow, swirling sheets, brushing against my face. The air was brittle, carrying the scent of ice and distant pine. Then I saw them. A flicker high above the horizon. Two glowing eyes, pale and alien, watching. They moved, swift, deliberate. But before I could focus, they were gone. I froze. The snow swirled thicker, muffling every sound. My breath hung in the air, fragile, curling into itself. The world felt distant, far away. I stepped forward. Boots sinking into soft ice, crunching under weight. The cold bit through my layers, and still the eyes lingered in memory. Pale, unblinking, impossible. I felt a pull, not physical exactly, something deeper. A tug at my chest, soft and insistent. I wanted to turn, to run, to look away, but my legs moved anyway. The wind rose. Snow whipped around me in tiny, frantic spirals. It filled my ears, pressed against my skin, rubbed my eyes. Shadows danced across the drifts, impossible and fleeting. And the pull persisted. I looked back. Nothing. The fog swallowed the landscape. Yet I knew. Something was there, watching, waiting. The air felt thicker now. I could taste frost on my tongue. The ground beneath me hummed faintly like the echo of those eyes. Every step made the snow whisper, soft and deliberate. I blinked. The eyes flashed again, just for a heartbeat. Closer this time, or perhaps closer in my mind. Green light in a gray world. Silent, patient, unnerving. I stopped. The pull became a weight, soft, almost seductive. My skin tingled. My ears rang with distant, vibrating tones. Every instinct told me to look away. Every instinct told me to move closer. The wind shifted. Snow fell faster, cold and wet, dampening my hair and lashes. The world contracted to the whiteness around me, and I sensed them everywhere in the fog, in the shadows, above the ice. A shadow passed overhead. I tilted my head. The eyes glimmered once more, then vanished again. The sky was empty, silent. I moved forward slowly, hands brushing against frost-laden air, boots pressing into soft snow. Every breath sounded too loud, too harsh, too real. The pull did not fade. It tugged at my chest, at my thoughts, at something deeper I could not name. The horizon remained gray, empty. yet the memory of those eyes lingered. Glowing, waiting, patient, I whispered to myself. Words swallowed by wind and snow. The world seemed to hold its breath. Time slowed, stretched, folded around me. The cold seeped deeper. I felt it in my bones. The pull softened but never disappeared. And I knew the eyes had not left. They were waiting, always watching, just beyond reach. I exhaled slowly. Snowflakes clung to my lashes, melted on my tongue. Silence wrapped the landscape. And still, the pull persisted. I did not turn back. I could not. I could only walk forward, toward the emptiness, toward the faint, unblinking glow above the ice. The wind rose, soft at first, brushing against my cheeks. It carried something else, a whisper. Faint, almost inaudible, I stopped. Snow swirled around my boots. Each breath I exhaled sounded loud, intrusive, echoing against the frozen emptiness. The voices persisted, urgent, indistinguishable, slipping beneath the wind. I followed, step by careful step, through the snow that clung to my boots and gloves. Branches scraped overhead, their frost-laden fingers reaching down. The whisper seemed to bend around the trees, circling, elusive. Something shifted under the snow. A branch, a stone, then another farther along the trail. I paused. Objects had moved. Not by wind. Not naturally. The snow was untouched. Yet here they were. The cold seeped deeper. I could taste frost on my tongue, feel it biting my lips. The whispers grew slightly clearer, or perhaps my mind wanted them to. A faint urgency, a rhythm beneath the wind, pulling me forward. I exhaled. Clouds of breath vanished almost instantly, carried away in spirals of snow. It sounded too loud in the stillness, like a reminder that I was alone. And yet, the whispers lingered, patient, watching. I reached the center of a small clearing. Footprints I didn't remember leaving tracked through soft drifts. Snow-coated objects, rocks, twigs, small scraps of metal, shifted unnaturally. I bent closer. The frost made my fingers numb. I touched one piece. It shivered beneath my touch. The wind shifted again. Snow rose, spinning, thickening, muffling the world. Even the faint hum of distant ice seemed distant now. Shadows pooled in the corners of my vision. I blinked and they moved slightly. Or I moved. The whispers pressed closer. I couldn't understand them, only feel them. A breath, a warning, an insistence. The cold wrapped around my neck and wrists, slow and patient. It smelled faintly of wet earth, of frozen water under metal. I tried to follow the pull. My steps left no mark in the soft snow. Or perhaps they did, but the wind erased them too quickly to see. Everything shifted. The clearing seemed smaller. The trees closer. The snow heavier. My own heartbeat thundered in my ears. Every breath seemed like intrusion. I wanted to stop, to sit, to turn around. But the whispers wouldn't let me. They moved with me. I reached another patch of snow. The objects had changed again. Not scattered, but positioned. Careful, deliberate, impossible. A rock here, a stick there. A pattern that made no sense and yet felt meaningful. I shivered. Cold seeped beneath my layers. The whispers slowed, softened, then vanished into the swirl of snow. Silence pressed in, thick, unyielding. I exhaled. The sound felt like an alarm, loud and raw. The clearing was empty. The objects lay still. The snow undisturbed, except for the faint trace of movement that wasn't mine. I realized something. I was utterly alone, and yet I wasn't. The wind had carried them or something all along, watching, waiting. The snow fell heavier now. Each flake melted on my eyelashes, on my lips. The cold pressed through my boots, my gloves, my skin. I could feel the isolation settle into my bones. I took a step. Another. The whispers were gone. The shifted objects remained. And the wind. It sighed softly, like a living thing. I was alone. Completely. And yet, I knew that even in this silence I was being followed, observed, measured by something I could not see. The snow continued to fall. The cold pressed. And I walked onward, toward a horizon I could not find, toward a quiet deeper than anything I had ever known. The wind had softened, but the air remained sharp. Snowflakes drifted slowly, landing on frozen ridges and brittle branches. The world shimmered pale and gray, cold and uninviting. Ahead, ice stretched like glass. Not just frozen snow, but smooth, reflective surfaces, catching what little light the sky offered. I stepped closer. My boots crunched softly, but the ice made no sound. I looked down. A reflection, but not my own. A flicker behind me, shapes I could not hold, shadows twisting just beyond vision. I turned. Nothing. Only the endless snow. The ice shimmered again. Another movement. Closer now, a suggestion of form in the mirrored surface. My pulse quickened. Cold air filled my lungs, sharp and metallic. I stepped forward cautiously, hand brushing the smooth ice, cold seeping into my glove. The surface was alive in a way I could feel. A subtle vibration, like whispers pressed beneath the reflection. I saw it again. A fleeting glimpse, pale, impossible, behind me. I spun. Empty snow. Only my own footprints, half buried and fragile. The mirrors stretched along the ice, catching light, wind, and shadow. Shapes moved as I moved, but not in unison. They flickered, refused to settle. I blinked. They changed. Subtle, but insistent. A shiver ran through me. The frost tasted metallic on my tongue. The wind pressed softly against my neck. And in the mirrored ice, I felt eyes. Watching, patient, curious. I stepped closer. The ice reflected me, but also the world behind me. Not as it was, but altered. Shadows bent where they should not. Branches twisted impossibly. The horizon seemed to ripple. I held my breath. The cold seeped deeper, biting my wrists through my coat. Every movement left the mirrors shifting, teasing. I reached out with my fingers. The ice pulsed beneath my touch. I glanced behind again. Nothing. Yet the mirror refused to lie. It reflected truths I could not comprehend, shapes that moved independently, eyes that lingered a moment too long. I tried to step back. The ice stretched beneath my feet, smooth, unbroken. My boots pressed against glass that felt alive. My hands tingled. The hum had changed. Slower, lower, waiting. A door opened ahead, frozen mid-swing. I stepped closer, brushing against the frost on the frame. The cold bit through my gloves. Inside, shadows pooled in corners. The equipment glowed faintly, a pale green light that made the walls shift subtly. I realized I wasn't alone. The feeling pressed against me. Not loud, not physical, but heavier than air. Patient, observing. I looked back. Nothing. Only the long hallway, lined with frozen windows, empty chairs, and the faint hum. But I knew it was there. The air thickened with its presence. The fog outside seemed to push against the glass, soft and damp, almost alive. I stepped away, hands brushing metal, frost crunching under boots. Every breath echoed. Every shadow seemed to lean toward me. The markings shifted once more. A whisper of movement that was almost a sigh. I didn't dare blink. I didn't dare breathe too deeply. The hum persisted. Soft, constant, insistent. The building held its frozen breath. And I understood suddenly the truth of the place. It was watching. Always watching. I took another step. The cold pressed against me. The fog outside rolled lazily across the windows. The lights pulsed faintly, the markings shifting silently. I didn't move again for a long moment. I was alone. And not alone. The sky was low and gray, heavy with clouds. Snow drifted in slow, swirling sheets, brushing against my face. The air was brittle, carrying the scent of ice and distant pine. Then I saw them, a flicker high above the horizon. Two glowing eyes, pale and alien, watching. They moved, swift, deliberate. But before I could focus, they were gone. I froze. The snow swirled thicker, muffling every sound. My breath hung in the air, fragile, curling into itself. The world felt distant, far away. I stepped forward. Boots sinking into soft ice, crunching under weight. The cold bit through my layers. And still, the eyes lingered in memory. Pale, unblinking, impossible. I felt a pull. Not physical exactly. Something deeper. A tug at my chest, soft and insistent. I wanted to turn, to run, to look away. But my legs moved anyway. The wind rose. Snow whipped around me in tiny, frantic spirals. It filled my ears, pressed against my skin, rubbed my eyes. Shadows danced across the drifts, impossible and fleeting. And the pull persisted. I looked back. Nothing. The fog swallowed the landscape. Yet I knew. Something was there, watching, waiting. The air felt thicker now. I could taste frost on my tongue. The ground beneath me hummed faintly like the echo of those eyes. Every step made the snow whisper, soft and deliberate. I blinked. The eyes flashed again, just for a heartbeat. Closer this time, or perhaps closer in my mind. Green light in a gray world. Silent, patient, unnerving. I stopped. The pull became a weight, soft, almost seductive. My skin tingled. My ears rang with distant, vibrating tones. Every instinct told me to look away. Every instinct told me to move closer. The wind shifted. Snow fell faster, cold and wet, dampening my hair and lashes. The world contracted to the whiteness around me, and I sensed them everywhere, in the fog, in the shadows, above the ice. A shadow passed overhead. I tilted my head. The eyes glimmered once more, then vanished again. The sky was empty, silent. I moved forward slowly. Hands brushing against frost-laden air, boots pressing into soft snow. Every breath sounded too loud, too harsh, too real. The pull did not fade. It tugged at my chest, at my thoughts, at something deeper I could not name. The horizon remained gray, empty. Yet the memory of those eyes lingered. Glowing, waiting, patient, I whispered to myself. Words swallowed by wind and snow. The world seemed to hold its breath. Time slowed, stretched, folded around me. The cold seeped deeper. I felt it in my bones. The pull softened but never disappeared, and I knew the eyes had not left. They were waiting, always watching, just beyond reach. I exhaled slowly. Snowflakes clung to my lashes, melted on my tongue. Silence wrapped the landscape. And still, the pull persisted. I did not turn back. I could not. I could only walk forward, toward the emptiness, toward the faint, unblinking glow above the ice. The wind rose, soft at first, brushing against my cheeks. It carried something else, a whisper. Faint, almost inaudible. I stopped. Snow swirled around my boots. Each breath I exhaled sounded loud, intrusive, echoing against the frozen emptiness. The voices persisted, urgent, indistinguishable, slipping beneath the wind. I followed. Step by careful step, through the snow that clung to my boots and gloves. Branches scraped overhead, their frost-laden fingers reaching down. The whispers seemed to bend around the trees, circling, elusive. Something shifted under the snow. A branch, a stone, then another, farther along the trail. I paused. Objects had moved. Not by wind, not naturally. The snow was untouched. Yet here they were. The cold seeped deeper. I could taste frost on my tongue, feel it biting my lips. The whispers grew slightly clearer, or perhaps my mind wanted them to. A faint urgency, a rhythm beneath the wind pulling me forward. I exhaled. Clouds of breath vanished almost instantly, carried away in spirals of snow. It sounded too loud in the stillness, like a reminder that I was alone. And yet, the whispers lingered, patient, watching. I reached the center of a small clearing. Footprints I didn't remember leaving tracked through soft drifts. Snow-coated objects, rocks, twigs, small scraps of metal shifted unnaturally. I bent closer. The frost made my fingers numb. I touched one piece. It shivered beneath my touch. The wind shifted again. Snow rose, spinning, thickening, muffling the world. Even the faint hum of distant ice seemed distant now. Shadows pooled in the corners of my vision. I blinked, and they moved slightly. Or I moved. The whispers pressed closer. I couldn't understand them, only feel them, a breath, a warning, an insistence. The cold wrapped around my neck and wrists, slow and patient. It smelled faintly of wet earth, of frozen water under metal. I tried to follow the pull. My steps left no mark in the soft snow. Or perhaps they did, but the wind erased them too quickly to see. Everything shifted. The clearing seemed smaller, the trees closer, the snow heavier. My own heartbeat thundered in my ears. Every breath seemed like intrusion. I wanted to stop, to sit, to turn around. But the whispers wouldn't let me. They moved with me. I reached another patch of snow. The objects had changed again. Not scattered, but positioned. Careful, deliberate, impossible. A rock here, a stick there. A pattern that made no sense and yet felt meaningful. I shivered. Cold seeped beneath my layers. The whispers slowed, softened, then vanished into the swirl of snow. Silence pressed in, thick, unyielding. I exhaled. The sound felt like an alarm, loud and raw. The clearing was empty. The objects lay still. The snow undisturbed except for the faint trace of movement that wasn't mine. I realized something. I was utterly alone. And yet, I wasn't. The wind had carried them or something all along. Watching, waiting, the snow fell heavier now. Each flake melted on my eyelashes, on my lips. The cold pressed through my boots, my gloves, my skin. I could feel the isolation settle into my bones. I took a step. Another. The whispers were gone. The shifted objects remained. And the wind. It sighed softly like a living thing. I was alone, completely. And yet, I knew that even in this silence I was being followed, observed, measured by something I could not see. The snow continued to fall. The cold pressed, and I walked onward, toward a horizon I could not find, toward a quiet deeper than anything I had ever known. The wind had softened, but the air remained sharp. Snowflakes drifted slowly, landing on frozen ridges and brittle branches. The world shimmered pale and gray, cold and uninviting. Ahead, ice stretched like glass. Not just frozen snow, but smooth, reflective surfaces, catching what little light the sky offered. I stepped closer. My boots crunched softly, but the ice made no sound. I looked down. A reflection, but not my own. A flicker behind me, shapes I could not hold, shadows twisting just beyond vision. I turned. Nothing. Only the endless snow. The ice shimmered again. Another movement. Closer now, a suggestion of form in the mirrored surface. My pulse quickened. Cold air filled my lungs, sharp and metallic. I stepped forward cautiously, hand brushing the smooth ice, cold seeping into my glove. The surface was alive in a way I could feel. A subtle vibration, like whispers pressed beneath the reflection. I saw it again. A fleeting glimpse, pale, impossible, behind me. I spun. Empty snow. Only my own footprints, half buried and fragile. The mirrors stretched along the ice, catching light, wind, and shadow. Shapes moved as I moved, but not in unison. They flickered, refused to settle. I blinked. They changed. Subtle but insistent. A shiver ran through me. The frost tasted metallic on my tongue. The wind pressed softly against my neck. And in the mirrored ice, I felt eyes, watching, patient, curious. I stepped closer. The ice reflected me, but also the world behind me. Not as it was, but altered. Shadows bent where they should not. Branches twisted impossibly. The horizon seemed to ripple. I held my breath. The cold seeped deeper, biting my wrists through my coat. Every movement left the mirrors shifting, teasing. I reached out with my fingers. The ice pulsed beneath my touch. I glanced behind again. Nothing. Yet the mirror refused to lie. It reflected truths I could not comprehend. Shapes that moved independently. Eyes that lingered a moment too long. I tried to step back. The ice stretched beneath my feet, smooth, unbroken. My boots pressed against glass that felt alive. Even as I stepped back, careful, deliberate, into the snow, into the fog, toward nothing, toward the horizon that would never answer. The forest thinned. Snow gave way to bare earth, frozen and brittle beneath my boots. Fog rolled low, brushing my shoulders, curling around my neck. A cabin appeared, alone, dark, still, windows black, reflecting the gray sky. The world seemed to hold its breath. I stepped closer. The wind whispered across the roof, loose shingles creaking softly. The air smelled faintly metallic. A tang of rust, of iron lingering like it had waited. I reached the door. Cold pressed against my fingertips as I brushed the wood. It was solid, unyielding, but not quite dead. Something pulsed beneath the surface, slow and rhythmic. Inside, the air was heavier. The metallic scent grew, subtle but insistent. It clung to the walls, the floor, the air itself. The cabin exhaled slowly, as though breathing with me, or at me. Shadows shifted. Across a wall, long and thin, stretching and contracting, almost alive. I blinked. It moved differently than any light should. The wood seemed to pulse beneath it. I stepped forward. The floor whispered under boots, soft, deliberate, measured. The scent of metal lingered, curling into the folds of my coat. Every breath felt loud, intrusive. A creak echoed above, or perhaps behind, or both. I could not tell. The cabin seemed to stretch, to watch, to wait. I reached the center. Light from the doorway faded, leaving only gray shadows. The wall shifted again. Breathing, pulsing, impossible to place. The shadow elongated, then contracted, as if the cabin itself inhaled. I exhaled slowly. Cold bit my lungs. Snow clung to my boots and coat, melting against warmth. The silence pressed, thick and patient around me. I moved toward a corner. The shadows followed, curling against walls, stretching along the floor. I touched the wood. It was solid. Yet it felt alive beneath my fingers. The cabin hummed faintly, almost imperceptibly. Not a machine, not wind, something else. The hum vibrated through floorboards, up my arms, into my chest. I turned slowly. The windows were black. No reflection, no light. Only the faint movement of shadows, impossible and patient. I exhaled. The air smelled sharper now, metallic and cold. Every sense heightened, every heartbeat loud in the stillness. The cabin had a pulse, a rhythm, a patience I could not comprehend. I stepped back toward the door. The shadows lingered, reluctant to release. The hum softened, fading, but the cabin did not sleep. It waited. I paused outside. The cold wrapped around me. Snow drifted across the roof, soft and patient. The forest stretched silent beyond the clearing, and inside the cabin held its secrets, unanswered. Breathing still, watching still, waiting. The canyon stretched before me, frozen and silent. Snow clung to jagged cliffs. The wind was thin, biting, curling around my coat. I spoke softly. A name, a word, barely audible. It returned. Slower, deeper, mocking somehow, though no one was there. I paused. The cliffs pressed close, gray stone glinting with frost. Every echo lingered longer than it should. Every shadow seemed to twitch, waiting, listening. I stepped forward. Boots sank slightly into brittle snow. The canyon hummed faintly, a vibration beneath my soles. Each exhale left a cloud of mist, curling against the rocks. I tried again. A soft word. The echo answered, slower, distorted, almost alive. I stopped. The wind carried faint rustling. Snow whispered along the cliffs. The canyon. It seemed to breathe with me. Or at me. The echoes shifted. Mocking, patient, learning. A syllable I had barely voiced, repeated in a tone I could not place. My chest tightened. Cold seeped deep. I reached the center. Snow drifts pressed against the rock walls, muffling steps. The echoes danced around me, weaving between cliffs, unpredictable. Every sound I made returned altered, a rhythm I could not follow. I exhaled slowly. Frost formed on my lashes. The air smelled of ice and wet stone, metallic faintly. I whispered. The echo drew it out, stretching it, shaping it, holding it. I moved forward. Every step sounded fragile. The canyon absorbed and returned my voice differently each time. Faster steps, slower words, a mocking melody I could not control. A shadow flickered along the edge of snow. I turned. Nothing. Only the gray cliffs, patient, immense. The echoes continued, patient, alive. I crouched, brushed snow from a ledge. Cold bit my fingers. The sound of my own movement returned, altered. Not mine anymore. I exhaled. The canyon seemed to hum beneath the snow, beneath the ice, beneath me. Each echo responded, shaping my voice into something impossible. I wanted to run, but the canyon held me, silent and patient. The wind shifted. Snow spiraled softly, settling against boots and coat. The echoes slowed, mocking, deep, almost aware. I spoke once more. It returned, holding my words just beyond recognition. I swallowed. Every sense heightened, every heartbeat loud. The canyon seemed to lean closer, listening, learning. I exhaled slowly. The echoes faded gradually, retreating into ice and stone. The wind whispered. The snow shifted softly along the cliffs. I was alone. And yet not alone. The canyon remembered. It had learned my voice, and it waited. I stepped forward. Snow crunched under boots. The air was still, patient. The cliffs pressed close, and the canyon held its silence, ready to answer again long after I had gone. The mouth of the cave yawned ahead, black and crystalline. Snow crunched under boots, brittle, uneven. A chill pressed from within, sharp and damp against my cheeks. I stepped inside. Light fractured across walls, glittering pale. Each movement caught on ice, reflecting shapes and shadows I could not name. The air smelled faintly of wet stone and frost, metallic, lingering. I noticed markings, etched into walls, glittering faintly in the pale light. Constellations or something like them. And as I moved, they shifted, slowly, subtly, almost alive. I paused. The ice hummed beneath boots, faint, vibrating through soles. A soft rustling reached my ears. I turned. Nothing. Step by step, I moved deeper. The glittering walls stretched and curved. Shadows pressed close, curling with each twist of the labyrinth. Air grew colder, damp against gloves and neck. The markings shifted again. Patterns bending, elongating, refusing to remain fixed. My breath fogged in clouds, curling around reflections. I pressed a hand against the wall. Cold, unyielding, yet vibrating softly as if it responded. Something moved behind me, a whisper of shadow, silent, patient. I froze. The cave swallowed every other sound. Even my heartbeat felt distant, muted. I walked slowly. Boots pressed lightly into ice, fragile, echoing faintly. Every step stretched time. The markings followed my gaze, rearranging as if watching me watch them. The shadow lingered, just beyond perception. A low hum rose. Not wind, not voice. Something beneath the ice, beneath the stone, resonating softly. I exhaled slowly. Frost clung to lashes and lips. The tunnel twisted sharply. I stumbled lightly over uneven ice. The shadow moved closer, always just beyond recognition. Always patient, waiting. I pressed forward. The labyrinth seemed endless. Each corridor glittered, alive with shifting constellations. The hum pulsed faintly beneath the floor, vibrating through boots, through gloves, through chest. I paused at a narrowing. The shadow lingered. Silent, immense in the absence of light. I swallowed. Cold bit my throat. A sudden narrowing forced me to crawl. Ice scraped my palms, glittering shards pressing against gloves. The shadow pressed closer. I moved faster, careful not to stumble, careful not to look back. The path twisted sharply again. A faint opening appeared ahead, pale light spilling softly across ice. I crawled, boots sliding, breath sharp and loud. The shadow lingered just beyond, patient, waiting. I emerged. The cave mouth closed behind me silently. Snow pressed against my boots, brittle and familiar. The markings vanished behind the glittering walls. I stood, heart hammering. The wind pressed soft and cold against my cheeks. The labyrinth remained hidden, alive. And I realized I had escaped. Only barely, only for now. The ridges stretched ahead, forested and gray. Snow clung lightly to twisted branches, brittle beneath my boots. The air smelled faintly of damp pine, cold and sharp. Shadows stretched unnaturally long. Branches bent against the wind, yet remained still. Every tree seemed to lean, to watch, to wait. I stepped carefully. Snow whispered beneath boots, soft, deliberate, fragile. Every rustle from above could be a creature. Every pause in the wind, a trap. The light bent around the trees. Pale, gray, curling in odd angles. It made the shadows twist differently than they should. I blinked, and the shapes seemed to shift again. I pressed forward. Cold bit through my gloves, sharp and slow. Frost formed on lashes, melting into eyes. Branches brushed softly against my coat, almost deliberate. A movement flickered between trunks. Too quick, too soft to identify, I froze. Silence held me, thick and patient, pressing close. Step by step, I moved. Snow crunched lightly beneath boots. The shadows stretched and twisted with every movement. Something followed just beyond perception. I exhaled. Breath fogged in the cold air. The scent of wet pine, of frozen soil pressed around me. Every sound seemed amplified, distant, impossible. Branches scraped overhead. Snow shifted softly along the forest floor. Shadows bent toward me, then away. It felt as though the forest itself was breathing. I moved slowly. The path narrowed, twisted between ridges. Shadows pressed closer. The light continued to bend strangely, curling along trunks, along snow, along me. A rustling reached my ears, soft, careful, patient. I turned, nothing. Only the gray forest, patient and immense. I pressed on. Boots sank slightly in snow. Shadows moved subtly at the edges of vision. Every step seemed to stretch time, long and unyielding. I paused at a clearing. Branches framed the sky, pale light curling across snow. Shadows bent unnaturally, twisted like smoke, reaching beyond their source. I shivered. The forest seemed alive, watching, waiting. Every sound returned, distorted, slow, deliberate. Every breath echoed strangely in the stillness. I moved again, careful, deliberate. Snow whispered beneath boots, soft and fragile. Shadows shifted and twisted at the periphery. The ridges pressed close, patient. I exhaled slowly. The wind curled through branches, brushing against my face. The shadows lingered, reluctant to release. And the forest held its secrets, patient, immense. I continued along the path, alone, cautious, aware of every sound. The trees bent, the light curled, and the shadows waited. And I knew. The forest had remembered me. Even as I moved forward, step by careful step, it remained patient, watching. The horizon stretched pale and gray. Snow pressed hard under boots, crisp, brittle. A wind curled low, brushing my neck, cold and damp. A light pulsed faintly, distant, rhythmic, like a heartbeat or a beacon. It flickered just beyond reach. I stepped forward. Boots sank lightly into frozen earth. The air smelled faintly of wet stone, metallic, sharp. Each breath left a curling mist around my face. The light pulsed again, soft, patient. Each beat felt deliberate, drawing me closer. Shadows stretched across ridges, bending strangely around the snow. I moved. The terrain shifted beneath boots. Ice formed patterns, deliberate, intricate, impossible. Lines that led, that guided, yet were not natural. I pressed forward. The hum beneath my feet was faint, vibrating through soles. Snow whispered against legs, soft and careful. Every step stretched time, slow and deliberate. The light flickered, beckoning. I blinked. It pulsed faster, closer, teasing distance. Patterns on the ice seemed to shift with each movement. Curving, twisting, deliberate, alive. I stopped. Frost bit my gloves. The wind curled around me, carrying faint whispers, unintelligible. The light pulsed, patient, unyielding. I stepped again. Shadows moved at the edges of perception. Branches or cracks in ice. Impossible to tell. Everything seemed aware, listening, patient. The hum beneath boots grew. The ice beneath shifted subtly, like water frozen mid-wave. Patterns rearranged themselves, curling, stretching, pointing. I followed instinct, careful, deliberate, quiet. The light pulsed again, rhythmic, waiting. I moved faster, cautious, boots crunching softly. Each step echoed strangely, absorbed and returned by the frozen terrain. I paused at a ridge. The horizon seemed alive, shifting with each heartbeat. Ice below reflected faint light in impossible angles. The pulsing beacon stretched and warped, distant yet near. I exhaled. Breath fogged, curling across the pale snow. The wind pressed soft against my cheeks. Every sense heightened, alert. I stepped toward the light. The ice rippled subtly beneath boots, patterns rearranging. The hum lingered, patient, vibrating beneath my chest. And then the light pulsed once, brighter, insistent, before fading just beyond the horizon, leaving silence. I stood. The frost clung to lashes and coat. The wind whispered faintly across the ridges, and the ice remained, deliberate, alive, patient, as if it had waited all along. The snow lay thick, brittle beneath my boots. A wind curled low, brushing my face with frost and whispering around trees. The horizon stretched pale, empty, distant. I noticed a vibration beneath my feet, low, steady, almost imperceptible. It hummed through boots, through ice, through chest. I knelt. Gloves brushed against the powdery surface. The hum pulsed, insistent, urgent, like a heartbeat beneath the frozen earth. Snow sifted through fingers, soft, cold, metallic beneath fingertips. I dug slowly. Each handful of snow revealed something beneath. Shards of metal, jagged and black, unlike anything I had seen. Cold and smooth, they glinted faintly, refusing reflection. The hum grew louder. Vibrations thrummed beneath the ice. It pressed into soles, into chest, into ears. A resonance that felt alive, patient, urgent. I held a shard. Cold burned through gloves. Edges were sharp, precise, impossible. The air smelled faintly of ozone and rust, metallic and sharp. I exhaled slowly. Breath curled in mist, curling around shards, around snow, around me. The hum rose again, insistent, pressing, vibrating against bones. I shivered. Alone, aware of every sound, every shadow. Snow shifted around my knees. The vibration pulsed stronger beneath me. I pressed hands to the ground. It throbbed, patient, deliberate, alive. I rose slowly. The shards glinted faintly in pale light. The hum pressed in my chest, vibrating through air, ice, snow. Every step felt amplified. Each crunch against snow returned distorted, deliberate. I looked around. The horizon seemed distant, unreal. Shadows pressed close, bending against pale light. The wind whispered, carrying the faint metallic scent. I stepped again. The ground beneath thrummed, guiding, patient. Snow shifted softly under boots. The hum vibrated, urgent, almost calling. I knelt again. Shards scattered faintly beneath snow, embedded as though placed, deliberate. The ice around them hummed softly, resonant, alive. I ran a gloved hand over a piece. It hummed back. The vibration rose, pressing. The hum pulsed, faster, sharper, insistent. Cold bit through gloves, through coat into skin, every sense heightened. I exhaled slowly. The shards glinted faintly, humming beneath snow. The wind curved around me, low and patient. The horizon remained distant, silent, and watching. I stepped back. The snow pressed cold against boots. The hum faded slightly, patient, deliberate, alive. The shards remained beneath snow, waiting, resonating beneath frozen earth. I stood alone. Wind curled, brushing cheeks, carrying faint metallic scent. The hum lingered softly beneath snow, beneath ice, beneath boots. And I realized it had waited and it would continue to wait. The snow lay soft and gray around me. The wind pressed low, curling across ridges, carrying the scent of frost and frozen earth. A faint crunch echoed under boots. I came across the first campsite. Tents stood upright, flaps still closed. Snow had dusted their surfaces, soft and brittle. Everything was in place. Yet no one was there. Pots and pans rested on stoves, untouched. Meals half prepared, half eaten, frozen into place. I breathed slowly. The cold seemed to stretch, stretching time around me. I stepped carefully. Footsteps pressed softly into snow, disturbing nothing else. The wind whispered faintly between tents. Every sound seemed amplified, distant, impossible. I moved to the next site. The pattern repeated. Equipment intact. Meals uneaten. No footprints leading away. Silence dominated. It pressed close, curling around boots, around coat, around chest. Even the wind seemed to hesitate, holding back. I knelt beside a metal crate. Frost clung to edges, biting gloves. Inside, maps lay unfolded, notes scattered. Everything left as if the people had simply vanished. Shadows pressed against the edges of tents. Snow shifted softly, almost imperceptibly. The smell of cold metal and faint smoke lingered. I exhaled, slow and careful. I walked between campsites. Every step echoed faintly, absorbed into emptiness. The wind carried whispers, or perhaps just imagined ones. Each pause pressed more urgently against my senses. I pressed fingers against a frozen meal. Cold bit through gloves. The food remained untouched, unchanged, eternal. It was as if the people had stepped away and never returned. The silence stretched. I listened. Snow sifting from branches, wind curling against boots. Nothing else. I walked slowly past another tent. Inside, supplies neatly stacked. A notebook lay open, pages frozen with frost. I traced the words lightly. They made no sense now. The writers had vanished. The air smelled faintly metallic. Frost clung to lashes, brushing lips. Every shadow seemed patient, observing. I felt a pulse of cold awareness underfoot. I stopped at the final campsite. Everything was arranged neatly. Even a small fire pit sat cold and dark. No footprints led away. I stepped back. The wind curled low across the snow. The empty campsites pressed close, patient, every sense heightened. I exhaled slowly. The cold bit against skin, against boots, against chest. The silence lingered, immense, deliberate, unbroken. And I realized the people had left nothing. Except absence. I walked away slowly. Snow pressed soft beneath boots. Shadows stretched across ridges, bending strangely with pale light. The emptiness followed, patient, immense, unyielding. Fog rolled across the ridges, thick and slow. It pressed against boots, soft, damp, curling into the collar of my coat. The air smelled faintly of ice and wet stone. Then lights appeared. Pale, flickering, darting unpredictably through the mist. They moved too fast to follow fully, too deliberate to ignore. I stepped forward. Boots pressed soft into snow, muffled beneath the fog. The lights shifted again, teasing, leading, impossible. Every instinct told me to follow. I moved. The fog thickened around legs and chest. Each step stretched, distorted. Snow whispered against boots, soft, fragile. The lights pulsed. One blinked close, then darted away. Another shimmered, pale, patient at a distance. They seemed alive, aware, teasing my every movement. I reached a ridge. Snow shifted underfoot. Wind carried a faint metallic scent, curling through mist. The lights flickered again, ahead to the left, then vanished behind fog. I hesitated. Breath curled in mist, curling around shoulders, biting cheeks. The fog seemed heavier here, pressing, patient. Every shadow stretched, bending strangely, impossible. I stepped again. The lights reappeared, flickering, erratic. Following felt instinctive, necessary. Each step warped, distorted, as if the ground itself resisted. I pressed forward. The fog shifted with me, curling low around boots. Snow whispered faintly, almost voice-like. The lights blinked, darting, alive. I stumbled slightly. The horizon vanished behind thick gray mist. The lights pulsed, beckoning, teasing. My breath came louder than usual, intrusive in the silence. I moved cautiously. Each blink of the lights left me uncertain, disoriented. Shadows pressed close, curling against my vision. Wind brushed across my face, soft, patient, almost aware. The lights shifted suddenly, closer then farther, impossible distances. I felt drawn, pulled, compelled, though logic insisted I stop. Snow shifted beneath boots, soft, uneven, guiding. I paused at a hollow. The fog swallowed the ridge behind me. The lights hovered just beyond reach, flickering, alive. Silence pressed close, patient, deliberate. I exhaled slowly. Breath fogged and hung in the air. The lights pulsed faintly, erratic, teasing. And I realized. The fog, the snow, the shadows, all were waiting. I stepped forward again. The mist curled around boots, soft, insistent. Lights flickered, teasing, never allowing full focus. Every step drew me deeper, uncertain, entranced. I stopped. The fog swallowed all but pale hints of light. Wind whispered faintly across the ridge. Snow pressed soft beneath boots. And in the quiet, I understood. I was alone. And the lights, they were patient. The wind pressed low across the frozen expanse. Snow drifted softly, curling against boots, brushing cheeks. The air smelled faintly of ice and stillness. Ahead, the ice changed. Smooth, clear, untouched by frost or decay. It gleamed faintly under pale light, impossible and precise. I stepped closer. Boots pressed soft into snow, each step slow, deliberate. The air felt heavier here, dense, patient. Breath curled slowly, hanging in the cold, curling around shoulders. Shadows moved, but not like shadows should. They stretched backward, rewinding, impossible, patient. No one else was here. I knelt at the edge of the ice. Fingers brushed the surface. Smooth, unyielding, almost alive. It vibrated faintly beneath touch. Cold, deliberate. Time felt strange. The wind slowed. Breath stretched into long, curling clouds. Snowflakes hovered mid-air before settling softly. I stepped back. Shadows shifted again, retreating against logic, impossible patterns. The air smelled faintly metallic, sharp, frozen. A hum seemed to pulse beneath the ice, subtle, insistent. I watched carefully. The surface reflected not only me, but moments I hadn't lived. Fleeting, impossible glimpses, shifting with every blink. Cold pressed into fingers, into face, into chest. I exhaled slowly. The snow beneath boots whispered softly. Every sense felt heightened, fragile, stretched. Even the silence seemed to breathe. I stepped forward again. The ice held firm, unchanged. The hum beneath rose faintly, patient, deliberate. Shadows moved backward, curling around edges of perception. I knelt again. Fingers trailed across smooth surface. A faint vibration shivered through gloves, through bones. The light reflected back, pale, impossibly still. I exhaled, careful. Breath fogged and lingered in air. The snow shifted softly under boots. Time felt suspended, fragile, stretched into itself. I stood slowly. Shadows moved again, deliberate, impossible. The ice held secrets I couldn't grasp, refusing reflection. A faint hum vibrated, patient, unyielding. I stepped back. The wind curled across snow, soft and deliberate. Every sound seemed distant, stretched, distorted. And I realized I was alone. And yet time itself was not. The snow softened underfoot, muffling every step. Wind pressed low across the ridges, curling into the collar of my coat. The air smelled faintly metallic, cold, almost alive. Ahead, stone jutted from ice, jagged, pale. Symbols etched into it glowed faintly, pulsing, patient. They seemed alive, breathing softly beneath the surface. I stepped closer. Boots pressed gently into snow. Each exhale hung in the air, curling slowly, fragile. The glow shifted as I moved my eyes, impossible patterns rearranging. I knelt, brushing frost from the surface. Cold bit through gloves, sharp, deliberate. The symbols pulsed faintly, as if aware of my touch. They whispered messages I could not understand, soft, urgent. I leaned closer. The stone shimmered, faint hum vibrating beneath fingers. Patterns moved again when I looked away. Every shift seemed deliberate, purposeful, and patient. I exhaled slowly. Breath fogged and lingered between me and the glowing markings. Wind pressed softly, brushing hair, rustling clothing. Silence stretched, deep, unyielding. I traced a symbol lightly. It pulsed beneath my touch, faint, insistent. Each movement of my eyes made the shapes rearrange like they were watching. A sense of comprehension hovered, just out of reach. I stepped back. The snow whispered beneath boots, soft, fragile. The glow reflected pale against my face, alive, almost breathing. The air smelled faintly of metal and frost. I paused. Symbols shifted again, subtle, deliberate. The hum beneath the stone rose slightly, patient, insistent. A shiver pressed along the spine, cold and quiet. I crouched, observing carefully. Light bent strangely, edges blurred, patterns impossible to fully grasp. The symbols conveyed messages I couldn't read, but I felt them. Curious, urgent. Shadows pressed close against the rock, twisting and elongating. I exhaled. Breath fogged, curling slow, suspended. The hum beneath stone vibrated faintly, almost a pulse. Silence wrapped around everything else. I traced the edge of one symbol. It shifted subtly, reorganizing into something new, fleeting, unknowable. The glow pulsed, slow, deliberate, as if calling attention. Every instinct told me to stop, but I couldn't look away. The symbols held me, patient, deliberate, alive. Wind whispered faintly across snow, brushing hair, pressing cold against face. The stone seemed aware of me, aware of every movement. I stepped back again. Snow shifted soft beneath boots, brittle, fragile. The glow faded slightly as distance grew, yet lingered, patient. Every sense heightened, fragile, stretched, and in the quiet, I realized I was alone. And yet, the markings watched. They waited. And the messages, they were not meant to be understood. Darkness pressed around me, thick and cold. Snow vanished beneath the shadows, replaced by black emptiness. Every step felt heavier, slow, deliberate. The air smelled faintly metallic. Breath curled in front of my face, pale, fragile. And then I heard it, another breath. Soft, deliberate, not my own. It matched my pace, mirrored every inhalation. I froze. Wind pressed low, whispering across my shoulders. The darkness seemed to thicken, swallowing shapes, swallowing sound. Yet each rustle of clothing, each soft crunch of snow became deafening. I stepped forward. Soft footsteps followed, echoing mine, slightly delayed. Every movement I made felt duplicated. Every pause extended, stretched unnaturally. I shivered. The cold wrapped tight, biting through layers. I could taste it, metallic and sharp. And still, the breathing continued. I turned slowly. Nothing. Yet the rhythm persisted. Closer. mirrored, patient. Shadows twisted at the edge of vision, bending unnaturally around me. I blinked. The shapes vanished, but the darkness remained. Alive. I exhaled, slow. My own breath sounded too loud, intrusive, echoing off invisible walls. It mixed with that other rhythm, that other presence, and the world felt small, tight, suffocating. I moved again, each step followed by the echo of a step that was not mine. The ground seemed to hum beneath boots, faint, trembling. I felt vibrations through snow and ice, subtle but insistent. I stopped. The other breath stopped too. A silence fell, heavy, thick. I could hear my heart beating, slow and fragile. The darkness pulsed around me. A rustle brushed past my ear, too soft to place. I turned, nothing but black. Yet instinct told me I was not alone, and I felt it. Watching, I exhaled. Frost fogged in front of my face, curling like smoke. The cold touched every exposed skin, sharp, insistent. I could hear it whisper across the shadows, soft, patient. I took another step. The mirrored movement followed almost perfectly. Every sound I made amplified. Snow, breath, the scrape of fabric. It filled the air, dense and oppressive. I shivered again. The dark pressed closer, suffocating, endless. A shadow moved at the edge of sight, stretching unnaturally long. I blinked. It vanished. The other breath returned. Closer now. Slow, deliberate. I felt it on the back of my neck, cold and steady. I exhaled. The fog of my breath hung suspended, trembling. My pulse quickened, fragile, exposed. I could feel every hair raised on my arms. I moved forward slowly. Soft snow pressed underfoot, yet each step echoed into the void. The mirrored presence followed, patient, unseen. The darkness swallowed everything else. And then, a pause. Silence stretched, thick and heavy. Only my breath remained. Until I realized it was not mine alone. The other exhaled, slow, cold, patient. I stopped. The darkness waited. The mirrored breathing waited. I was alone. And yet not. The wind shifted suddenly. Snow began to fall heavier, thicker, stinging my face. The horizon disappeared, swallowed by a swirling white. I felt the storm first in my bones. Cold pressed deep, biting and unrelenting. Every breath burned, icy and sharp. Shapes appeared in the blizzard, vague at first, twisting in the snow. Some seemed human, others not. I could not tell where the familiar ended and the alien began. I moved slowly, each step swallowed by the storm. Soft snow muffled my footsteps, but not the hum under the ice. It vibrated faintly through my boots, insistent, almost alive. I shivered, cold and exposed. The wind roared against my ears. It carried whispers, distant, incomprehensible. I couldn't tell if they were voices or the storm itself. A shadow loomed. Tall, impossible, bending in ways snow should not allow. I blinked. It was gone. Then another appeared, closer, moving with the rhythm of the wind. I pressed forward. Snow clung to my jacket, crusting into ice. Breath came in shallow, hurried puffs. The world narrowed to white and black and shapes I could not name. I tried to call out. My voice vanished almost before leaving my lips. Only the storm answered, and still those shapes followed, patient, drifting in and out of perception. My hands froze. I could feel the sting of ice through my gloves. Fingers stiffened, heavy. Every surface was slick, untrustworthy. Even the ground seemed to move beneath me, shifting slightly with the blizzard. A figure passed close. I felt it before I saw it. The air shifted, colder, heavier, carrying an alien scent. Metallic, wet, sharp. I turned. Nothing. The snow thickened. Darkness pressed from above, even in the day. I could barely see my own boots, but I could feel eyes, watching, waiting. I stumbled forward. The shapes loomed and receded. Some resembled faces I might have known. Others were wrong, twisted, unnatural. I could not escape them. The wind screamed. It pushed against me, relentless, impossible. I fell to my knees, snow gathering in my hair, melting in my breath. I tried to rise. The storm did not relent. Everything was white, and yet black shapes cut through the snow. Soft shadows, moving slower than the wind, but deliberate. Every instinct told me to run. Every part of me knew I could not. I felt the cold of metal under my hands. Something protruded through the snow, shards glinting faintly in the storm. The wind howled around it, carrying the faintest hum, low and urgent. I pressed my fingers against it, cold, alien, alive. I stumbled again. Snow filled my boots, icy water seeping in. Breath came in ragged puffs. I felt my pulse quicken. And still, the shapes moved, drifting closer in the blizzard, yet never touching. I paused. Silence fell for a fraction, broken only by my own shallow breathing. The storm seemed to watch. The air thickened, heavier with each heartbeat. I pressed on. The world contracted to snow, wind, and shadows. I felt the storm's weight pressing on my shoulders, the air thick and metallic. Survival felt impossible. And then, a faint glimmer of pale light ahead. It pulsed like a heartbeat, rhythmic, deliberate. I did not know if it was real. Or another shape, another trick of the storm. I moved toward it anyway. Snow filled my lungs, icy and sharp. Every step felt measured, slow, as if the ice itself resisted me. And the shapes followed, patient, hovering, neither leaving nor touching. The blizzard raged. Cold seeped deeper, but I kept moving. One step after another, the world became white, soundless, endless. And still, I was not alone. The storm whispered around me. Shapes loomed. Breath hissed through ice and snow. I did not stop. The sky was pale, almost washed out. Snow drifted lazily across the horizon, whispering against my jacket. The air felt heavy, pressing against my lungs with each breath. I saw it first in the corner of my eye. A figure, pale, almost fading into the mist. It drifted slowly, deliberate, as if it moved on purpose, even in nothingness. I stopped. Snow swirled around my boots, crunching softly. The wind carried a hum, low, vibrating through the soles of my feet. It seemed to echo the figure's rhythm. I tried to focus, but the figure remained featureless. No face, no shadow of expression, just intention. Watching, waiting. The horizon blurred. Light bent strangely around the drifting shape, pale and unnatural. I shivered, cold and unsettled, though my jacket was thick. Breath came in short, visible bursts, curling and vanishing into the mist. I moved forward. Slow, careful steps. Snow clung to my boots, to my gloves. The world narrowed to white and pale gray, and that figure ahead, sometimes it paused. Sometimes it drifted closer, impossibly smooth, ignoring the rough terrain. I could not tell if it noticed me, or if I even mattered. I raised my hand, touching my face through frost-bitten gloves. The air smelled metallic, like ice pressed against old steel. The hum underfoot rose slightly, resonating through the ground. Every instinct told me to run, but curiosity rooted me in place. I wanted to know if it would move toward me or vanish. Every second stretched impossibly long, shadows of snow twisting strangely. I blinked. It shifted slightly when I looked away. I turned quickly. Nothing had changed. Or maybe everything had, the wind whispered. Not words I could understand. Just a soft rustling like fabric over bare skin. It drifted around me, carrying the figure's presence. I noticed the silence in other directions. No birds, no cracking ice, no distant echo. Only the figure, the hum, and my shallow breathing. I stepped closer. Snow squished beneath my boots, icy water seeping in. The figure remained, featureless and pale, almost glowing against the gray sky. It did not blink. It did not move faster. It simply was. I crouched briefly to touch the snow. Cold, granular, settling unevenly, resisting my hand. When I looked up, it had drifted nearer. Closer than it should have been, yet still impossible to measure. A shiver ran through me. Not from cold, not entirely. From the feeling of being observed. From knowing I was not alone. Yet no warmth, no breath, no sound of flesh or movement. I exhaled slowly. The mist swallowed my breath almost immediately. And still, the figure remained. Featureless. Waiting. Patient. I tried to step around it. Every motion mirrored by the snow, by the hum, by the subtle bending of light. I could not escape its attention. Or perhaps it did not have attention. Perhaps it simply existed, time dilated. Seconds melted into minutes. The horizon remained frozen, pale. The figure did not blink. It did not turn. It simply drifted, an enigma in the mist. I whispered my own name. The wind carried it back to me, slower, hollowed, like a question. The figure did not answer. It did not change. I moved again. Step by step, snow crunching underfoot, air biting my face. The hum faded slightly, then returned. A rhythm, subtle, syncing with my pulse. Finally, I stopped. The figure lingered there, just beyond reach, beyond understanding. I did not know if it was alive, watching, or simply waiting, and I did not move closer. I only breathed. Cold, shallow, visible in the mist. The figure drifted in silence. The horizon remained pale, and I waited. The snow stretched endlessly, gray and white, punctuated by shadows I could not name. The air was thin, pressing into my chest, making each breath deliberate. I walked, or thought I did. The ground shifted beneath me. Footsteps seemed to stretch, then shrink, leaving uneven prints that confused my mind. The horizon. It bent strangely, curved, folding in ways impossible, like the sky itself had softened. I tried to find a reference point. Nothing stayed the same. A low hum traveled beneath the ice. Vibrations tickled my bones, echoing the rhythm of my pulse. I stopped, crouched, felt it rise and fall. The world seemed aware, watching, responding. Snow swirled against my face. It whispered against my neck, slipping through layers of jacket and scarf. Shadows stretched and shrank with the shifting light, never consistent, always teasing. I spun slowly. One direction became another. Every landmark seemed to melt away, then reappear, but wrong. I was disoriented in a world that should have been simple. The hum became a subtle static in the air. Not sound exactly, but vibration against my skin. The horizon pulsed faintly as though it breathed. Cold, endless breath that pressed against my ears. I took another step. The snow resisted, granular, uneven. My boots sank and scraped against hidden ice. I thought I saw a ridge, then it curved under itself. Gone. Silence hovered over everything. Even the wind felt subdued, like it dared not interfere. My own breathing was sharp, loud, intrusive in this unnatural quiet. I reached for something to hold on to. A rock? A tree? Nothing solid remained. Everything twisted just beyond perception. I moved again, cautiously. Shadows bent around me. The horizon shifted when I looked away. When I turned back, it had changed again. The world was alive, and I was a stranger inside it. A faint shimmer appeared in the distance. Light, pale, and cold, sliding across the curvature of the land. I tried to move toward it. The snow resisted differently, as though judging each step. I stopped. The horizon yawned, impossibly wide. I felt suspended, trapped in this slow, endless moment. Time itself seemed to lag. The hum returned, low and insistent. Not from beneath the snow, not entirely. From the air, the space around me. A pulse I could not place. I whispered a name I barely remembered. The sound echoed back, stretched and hollow. It was not my voice. Not exactly, I breathed. Cold air stung my lungs, made me shiver. The snow wrapped around me, soft but heavy. Shadows shifted once more. The horizon continued to curve, fold, vanish, and return. I realized I could not distinguish up from down, near from far. This world had become a living maze, aware of me in ways I could not comprehend. I moved slowly, step by step, every motion mirrored by the environment, by the shifting land. I became aware of my own heartbeat in the quiet, loud, and solitary. I stopped again. The world seemed to pause with me. Everything, snow, shadow, horizon, waited. For me or for something else? I exhaled. Breath curled and vanished in the cold mist. The horizon bent, the shadows shifted, and the world continued. Alive, observing, unyielding. I stood alone, footsteps half swallowed by the snow. Time stretched. The vanishing horizon. It waited. The snow lay heavy, frozen in the pale light of an unsteady sun. Every ridge and hollow seemed still. Yet the silence held weight, almost listening. I stepped forward. Boots pressed into brittle ice, leaving shallow impressions that vanished almost immediately. Each crunch echoed strangely, as though repeated by the world itself. A faint murmur rose from beneath the ice. Not wind, not my own breath. Laughter, distant and brittle, slipped through the frozen crust. Whispers followed, curling around my ears. Some words I almost recognized. Others folded into tones I could not place. I froze. The air felt charged, dense with memory. Every sound I had made, every step, it lingered here, trapped. I touched the ice, cold and smooth, yet pulsing faintly like it held something beneath the surface. A soft vibration hummed through my fingers, low, insistent. The whispers shifted, responding. Warning, observation? I couldn't tell. A sudden laugh, a child's? Bounced across the hollow. It wasn't mine. It wasn't someone else I could see. It came from the ice, from everywhere and nowhere. I tried to move. The world seemed to tilt slightly, and my own footsteps echoed back to me, stretched and warped. Each exhale, a fragment of sound replayed, slightly delayed, slightly altered. The ice held memories. I realized then it was recording, not passively, actively. Every sound, every motion, every whispered thought caught and returned, distorted. Shadows in the ridges flickered. Faint glimmers of movement, reflections of the past. I saw shapes of people long gone, crouched, wandering, slipping between the layers of frost. They were echoes, frozen in place yet moving, aware yet still. I whispered my own name softly. It answered back, warped, hollow, heavier than I had spoken it. My voice had weight here, carried meaning I couldn't yet interpret. I stepped over a ridge of ice. The snow shifted beneath me with a faint rustling. It wasn't snow settling, it was alive, remembering. Whispers returned closer now, urgent yet indecipherable. I crouched, listening. Each sound, breath, footstep, distant laughter, layered over itself. The ice replayed them in loops, stretching time into something unfamiliar. I felt watched, but not by eyes I could see. By ears, by memory, by the frozen air itself. A subtle vibration pulsed through the ground. It rose slowly, felt through souls, up into my bones. A hum, steady, almost deliberate. I understood then, without words, I was not simply observing. I was part of it. The whispers slowed, fading, replaced by silence heavy enough to feel solid. The ice had collected everything, and now it was waiting, listening, recording. I exhaled. Cold air curled around my scarf made me shiver. I stepped back, then forward. Each motion amplified, echoed, returned to me slightly off. The world had become its own mirror, reflecting not just my image, but my presence, my life, my sound. I turned slowly. Every ridge, every hollow, every shadow, familiar yet alien. The echoes of past footsteps layered beneath mine. The frozen laughter twisted into something soft, almost mournful. I realized I could never leave entirely. The ice remembered. It would carry me, layer me into its memory, whisper my steps to whoever came after. I took a breath. It returned to me stretched, distorted. I held my hands against my ears. The whispers, the laughter, the echoes, persistent, alive. I moved forward again, not sure where I would end, or if the ice would ever release me. But the world beneath my feet had already decided. It remembered. It waited. The ridge rose slowly beneath my boots, sharp with frost. Wind whispered along the edges, carrying the faint taste of ice and distant stone. The world below dissolved into shadows, cold and soft. I stopped. Above me, the sky spread wide and dark, not empty, but alive with patterns I could not name. Constellations that should not exist, alien in their shape, stretching across the heavens in geometries my mind could almost, but not quite, follow. A hum lingered beneath my feet, subtle, like the earth breathing. It pulsed, low and steady, under the frozen ridge. I could feel it in my bones. Each breath I drew seemed heavier, the air thick with silence and expectation. Shapes moved above, slow and deliberate. They didn't touch the ground. They hovered, observing, shifting with the dark. Not threatening, but not friendly either. I sensed awareness. An intelligence older than my understanding, patient and quiet. I tried to speak. Words froze in my throat. There was nothing to say. Nothing that could hold weight here. I could only watch. Only feel the vastness pressing softly against the edges of my mind. The cold seeped through my jacket, into my spine. Fingers tingled. The ridge beneath me felt sharp and alive. Each small movement sent echoes up the slopes, whispers of snow brushing snow. The shapes above tilted just slightly, as though responding to my presence. I imagined eyes where there were none, a gaze that measured time differently, that held patience in a way I could not. I shifted my weight, and the stars seemed to pulse in response. Alien constellations rippled faintly, like water pressed by wind. The sky was not silent. It hummed softly, a tone that resonated through my chest. Alone. Completely, utterly alone. Yet I felt part of it. A thread in the expanse, a breath in the dark pattern of the universe. I lowered myself to the ridge, snow crunching softly under my palms. The air smelled of ozone, cold and metallic. The shapes paused, hovered, observing. The night stretched around me, immense and indifferent, but not cruel. A single pulse ran through the ridge. The hum rose, a resonance I could not trace. It carried memory, presence, intention. I realized the stars were not distant. They were here. And I was here too, soft whispers of wind wrapped around me. I exhaled slowly, letting the cold draw out the fear that had clung to my shoulders. The shapes remained still, patient, watching. I could not move faster than the moment allowed. I lifted my gaze again. Constellations shifted subtly, patterns rearranging, as though breathing, as though aware of me below. I was small against the sky, but significant in ways I could not measure. The hum softened. Snow pressed into my palms, soft under my weight. I felt the ridge hold me, the night hold me, the shapes hold me. I was alone. And yet I was not. I belonged to this vastness, a fragment among the stars. Silent, watching, waiting, understanding without comprehension. A cold breeze traced the edge of the ridge, carrying the faintest taste of something metallic, something timeless. The night did not hurry. It did not judge. It only was. I lay back slowly. Snow cradled my shoulders. The alien constellation stretched above, infinite, and I let the silence fill me. The shapes lingered, still and patient. I felt the hum in my chest, a reminder that I was part of it now, even if only for this moment. The wind softened. The sky pulsed gently above. Alone yet enfolded. Watching yet held. I exhaled, and the night exhaled with me.